what I would like to do is to talk to you a little bit about an issue that we have, that we've identified. I know that you're aware of it already, about how we're going to improve the deployment of some of our trust resources, because you'll be aware that we had a surprise in the data that we had in July last year. So that's what I'm going to do, and hopefully you'll be able to see that there is something we can do about it. Okay, so first of all, if you look at the data that I've given you on your tables, there are some results, that you can see. What you can see on there is that outcomes last year generally for the trust were not good. These are the key stage 2 outcomes, and you can see on there, this is data that you've already had, I know that, but you can see on there that outcomes were not good, and often the outcomes for the whole trust were determined by certain schools. You can see that certain schools there were issues, and the thing that didn't happen was that we weren't aware of those, or not to the extent that we should have been at the time. So we couldn't get into schools that needed help. It wasn't as apparent as it should be. Now, part of that is because last year was so hectic because we had such a growth in the trust. I personally realised that in December of 2017, July 2017, there was one school in Hull and East Riding, and by December 2018 there were 6. So you can see that there was a massive increase in the number of schools that joined the trust, and I think that because of that, necessarily we were, as a central team, were having to react to that, and our job descriptions and what we were doing was we didn't really I don't think feel particularly prepared for it. The resources were stretched even further by the fact that there were some of the schools that were joining the trust, there were real issues. So I know that Gail, for example, was having to go and do exec head for 2 days a week, I think. I had to do the same in one of the other schools in Hull and East Riding. We were not aware of that until it actually happened, until a crisis happened. So I do think that we had stretched resources. And as I said here, our roles changed. So what I did was, there's a process that you can go through when you're trying to drill down into why something has happened, which is called the 5 whys analysis. The 5 whys analysis is basically something from Toyota years ago, but it's still used, and it's still a good process. And so what I did was I had that starting point, which was results across the trust were not good, schools missed their targets, and this was the big key one, both they and the trust were surprised by that. We weren't expecting it. So then you have to think why. So the first why, I said predictions of results were inaccurate, and the assessment systems weren't working. That was the first thing, because we should have known. We should have been in there quicker. Why was that? Because there was too little focus on accuracy and consistency across the trust. Schools coming in didn't know the systems. They didn't know how to do pupil progress meetings and things like that. They were not robust enough. And moderation events were not effective. We were not seeing moderation across the whole. And what was happening, the reason for that, when you drill down further in the next why, is we had assessment systems from all over. Different schools joining assessed differently. So moderation was really difficult. And because we were here, there and everywhere and trying to react to things that were happening, our focus, the central focus from the leadership team was reduced. Why? Because there were no clear job descriptions for the central team. This was something that we were trying to make it work as we worked through it. It wasn't anybody's fault, it was just that our roles were changing so often because of the growing needs of the trust. But I do think that then meant, I know for me personally, that schools were not then held to account robustly. And again, why? And I think it was that we hadn't spent time investing in setting up systems. We were doing things too much ad hoc. So those were my feelings, that that's where we got to. So what I'm trying to do now is to present something that I think will mean that we can do it differently this year. So this is what I feel as though we need. I think that we do need a consistent measurement of pupil progress and attainment. We definitely need that. It needs to be understood by everybody. It needs to be easily collated. It can't be something that takes a long time to do, because that's what we've got at the moment. And the big one is it needs to be accurate in its prediction of where we're going to get at the end of the year. I think that the EBOR central team have to have an accurate picture of teaching and learning across the trust. And the reason for that is that I think we need to know where our strengths are, as well as those areas that need development. We need to be able to call on people from the trust, from other schools, to help where there are areas where there are weaknesses. I know we do that for school-to-school support, but we do it less well for ourselves. I think that we need a shared picture of the leadership. We've got so many new leaders in schools. So many of our heads of school are inexperienced, and we need to make sure that we support them somehow in a tailored way. And we need to use people who are experienced. We've got people here today. We need to use your skills to support those people who are less experienced. And finally, I do think that we need to have a regular review of the school improvement picture, so that we can then make sure that we are giving the support when it's needed, where it's needed. We need to clarify the roles of the exec team and of the head teachers and heads of school. We need to know the difference and what we as execs are and what the role for the head teacher or the head of school is. We need to decide what the core offer is. What are we going to give to all schools as an exec team? We need to then say, okay, so there are some schools that need additional support, and we need to develop a package for them. We need a school improvement team. And again, we've had people in that role. We've had people doing things in that role, but I don't feel they've been a team. And I do think that will help if we have a team. We notice from the data that early years is an issue for several schools. So we need somebody who's going to tackle that and look at that in detail. We need a new trust-wide assessment system. We need to develop a monitoring system that's used by everybody and understood by everybody. And finally, what we need to do is to develop a calendar that ends up with, this is the data that we can give to the trust on a regular basis. Because trustees need that information. We can't have the surprise that we've had this time. So if you look at the large sheet that is in front of you, that is all the data for the finance of this suggestion that I got. But then, because that's so complicated, I would invite you to have a look at it later, and we can interrogate it later. But I would like to suggest that you look at the second sheet, which is the that one, Jo. Yeah, thank you. I'd like to suggest that you look at that one, because that basically is the summary of the bigger sheet. So the first thing is that the trust expansion, what that's done, it gives us now a much greater GAG funding, and looking at that, we're about 21 million, which is a lot of money. It sounds fantastic. Then you realise there are a lot of schools, but that's the GAG funding. But if we take the 1% that is for central school improvement, we can see that as 211,000. So you as head teachers, you as trustees, will see that actually that amount of money isn't that great when you think of all the things that we need to do. So that's why we've got to find a different way. So you'll see on the sheets that they're in the blue colour. You'll see on there that I end up with a core offer. If I go through what the core offer is, the core offer would give 5 days of executive support, monitoring, presence. So each school will get 5 days of executive time. They'll get 3 days of SEND support. They will get 1 safeguarding day and 2 bespoke days from the ESIT team, from whoever it is, wherever you need most support, whether it's your early years or maths or whatever, behaviour. In addition to that, you would have 100 days of joint CPD, access to that. So the things like the maths TRGs, the Reading for Real projects that we're planning. That would come out as a cost of 210,000. So you can see that we then are funding our core offer with a little bit over, actually. We're funding our core offer from that GAG, 1% of GAG. Then additional costs need to be met by schools, and again, you'll see that the detail of those. I don't intend to go through those unless you would like me to. I'm very happy to take questions afterwards. We need to purchase that new assessment system. What we're looking at the moment, we're still looking, but we think that it will be cost neutral for most schools, because most schools have got a package already that they pay into. So I think that would be just about cost neutral. I've made sure that our ESIT team, the school improvement team, has 300 days that are flexible. I think that's really important because we need to be able to react to what we're finding the picture is. So whilst we've got some additional funding going into those schools that need it, sorry, not funding, additional support going into those schools that need it, we also need the ability to react. So that's why I've put those 300 days as flexible. And the final thing is that this model doesn't take account of the sponsorship money that we're getting. But I do strongly feel that we need to make it work for without the sponsorship money, which is what I presented, but use the sponsorship money to develop our people, to develop our teams. We need to develop expertise, and I think we're good at it, so we need to do it. I have done a SWOT analysis, that famous, we've seen these so often, I know, but again, oldies are goodies. These are my ideas of what the strengths and weaknesses are. I'm sure, and this is why I've given you some post-its, I'm sure that there are others. That if you think that you think there are others than this, I would love to know. But I think that the strengths are that there'll be a clarity of the updates for the trust, and there won't be the surprises. We will know where the issues are. It'll be accurate in its data picture, and we'll know exactly what the priorities for development are, and it will respond to need. I think it'll recognise strength across the trust, and as I say, I think that's key, and it's transparent. So you as head teachers will know what we're spending the money on and how other people are getting additional funds in. I think it's fair, and I think it gives us a clarity of roles. However, the weaknesses, the first one, I couldn't decide whether to put it there, but I decided to. There is the transparency. Because actually, if we're saying this is what you are expecting to get for your money, then we've got to deliver it. So in a way, you know, it doesn't give you anywhere to hide. Now, I think it's probably a strength, but I'll put it as a weakness. It relies on the wider team buy-in. You know, we need people to buy into this so that they can support each other. The 5 days and the core offer is a bit one size fits all. Maybe we need to look at that. It does need a little bit of additional funding, but we've got that from the increased gag. The big one is that we've been working as execs quite closely with some of our newer heads. I think that's developed dependency, but will they sink if we're doing this differently? And also there's the possibility that the central meetings will be time consuming. We've got to make sure that they're not. Because we don't want to weigh the pig and not fatten it in terms of threats. It also, David Carter says, the worry of this is that if you put all your effort into developing the weaker schools, your stronger schools stagnate. I think that by doing this, by saying to you, as stronger schools, let's support others, I think that won't happen, personally. I've already talked about the inexperienced leaders sinking, and there is, I suppose, a risk that if we're doing all this for the schools, that within the trust, then our school-to-school support income might reduce. But I've put the opportunities there. I don't think I need to go into that, because I think I've dealt with it elsewhere. So that's the proposal. I'd love to hear if you've got any questions for me or any feedback that you can give me.
I'm interested in your observation about team and school support team. How do you see that developing as the year goes forward? From individuals to a team?
Yes, well, I think it's about getting them together and letting them see the whole picture. Because I think at the moment what they do is they see the picture for English or they see the picture for maths or whatever. And I think actually, as a whole, they have got a far greater knowledge. You know, these are practitioners, aren't they? Our maths lead is a practitioner across the whole. So I think that her work in a school, if we deploy her to a school, if she knows that actually she's not just looking at maths, she's looking at the whole, I think that gives us a richer picture. And I think for them, that will give them a way of collaboration. And I know for me, if I can talk to somebody about something and work something out together, is far better. So I feel as though that's the way forward. I also feel that the behaviour lead has almost been apart from the curriculum leads, bringing her in because she has a real effect in schools. Bringing her in and allowing her to see the bigger picture would be a positive for me.
So connecting them together.
Yes, I think so.
You mentioned in the core offer, you said a potential weakness there was a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah.
Has any consideration been given to obviously the number of pupils in schools? For example, what you're going to get through in a 700 pupil school with a day of SEN or 3 days of SEN is going to be quite different to what you're going to do in a school with 50 pupils. Has any consideration been given to that?
At the moment, I'm being really honest and saying no, because I feel as though we've got to establish a system. Yeah. But I think going forward, Sarah, I would say that is the case, that you do need to look at that. because I get it that, you know, that a school of 50 is going to have very different needs than a school of 400 or whatever we've got. Yeah, so I agree that that is the case. I think, though, we've got to get the system in place before we start making it more nuanced. That would be my argument.
You said that you've got quite a lot of inexperienced head teachers or heads of school.
Yeah.
What do you propose doing about that to try and support them?
We're in discussion at the moment about whether or not well, there are two things. First of all, I think we need to somehow find a way of almost measuring leadership potential, to be able to say these are the issues where this leader needs support, these are the areas where they're strong. So I think that's the first thing. And then going on from there, we're already discussing the thought of having a bespoke leadership programme, which I think would help. And again, we would use the expertise around the trust to be able to deliver that. Yeah, that's what I'd hope.
As far as the SWAT was concerned, I think you saw a threat being the fact that we might lose the ability to give external school-to-school support because we became quite inward-looking and inward-supporting. Assuming that external support is financially beneficial, looking at the chief exec, what about actually putting the capacity into the trust to be able to cater for external requests? Is there any business case for that?
Maybe. What I would say is that I think we went too far the other way last year, in that all the expertise seemed to be going out to school-to-school support. And we found we're really well thought of in lots of the authorities, the local authorities. They ask for us because the system that we've found is really positive. It's a really positive model. So we should be using it in our own schools. So I think going forward, we'll probably be able to do both, because as you build capacity, you'll have the capacity then to support others. But I do think that those results can't happen again. So therefore, we've got to get the support into our own schools first. That would be my argument.
This might be a question for the exec team, isn't it, about the commercial case, really?
Yeah.
I mean, I do recall 2.5 years ago, prior to 2.5 years ago, we were expecting that the trust held surplus capacity specifically for this reason, so that it could do the ad hoc support where required and do the external. And it's maybe just a question that needs to be asked.
That's something to look at, isn't it? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, thank you.
Are there any alternative funding streams? You mentioned schools that perhaps need a specific package of support and things. I'm just thinking of a budgetary concern there, because I'm not sure there's any correlation between poor budget and outcomes. That's a whole other avenue to explore, isn't it? Yeah. But what's going to happen if schools can't afford it? So you've got a school in need and they haven't got the budget.
Well, the first thing is that they would know about it. It'll be built in, the initial package. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that there is a little, if we go back, there's a small amount, not much, but a small amount left over in the core package. We've also got this sponsorship money that I still think we can use creatively. So I suspect that there is money there, but we've got to be very careful about how we use it. Ultimately, that if a school is having problems, then that school has got to be able to fund the solutions, is my opinion.
What do you think the wider responsibility is of schools? You mentioned about stronger schools,
yes,
and their responsibility to support others.
Yeah.
I was just interested in that comment there, because it was like the schools, if you've got a weakness within your school, you've got to do something about it. Where do you think the wider responsibility comes from?
I always feel that, you know, your team, as in the whole of EBOR, is ultimately as strong as your weakest member. So I do think there's a moral imperative to offer support, and that's one of the things I do think EBOR is good at. I think that we're good at offering support. What I meant was the financial part of that. It's not that I do think that we are, as I say, there is an imperative that we support those schools, but I think that successful schools who've got a tight budget would find it hard for us to say, can we have some of your money in order to be able to support this? That's all my thinking was. Hence why we're saying we've got to be creative with the money coming in. That's not the core money.
Does this go back to the one-size-fits-all argument again, whereby forget spreading money between schools, because it should be ring-fenced ideally, but there may be some successful schools who actually don't need the full benefit of the core offer.